Hello and welcome back to the Social Matters podcast. We are three social workers talking about social matters. My name is Fran.
Hi, I'm Nadia.
Hi, and I'm Eugene.
Welcome, people.
Yeah.
How are you both? Looking fly in your green theme.
Yeah.
Oh, white.
Yeah.
Oh, green on your
on my stripes.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of upset because if people who are eagle-eyed viewers will know that we bring our own Social Matters cups on mugs onto the set, and
How many are there?
look at that.
So huge.
And with me, I forgot you're an idiot. I forgot you're at home.
And also, you were the one that kindly last night was like, right, team, don't forget your mugs, and then walked in without his mug. Absolute mug. Hey, I'm here all day. God, that was on the floor, dad joke.
That's my sort of humour. I like that one, Fran. Good one.
But I wanted to like draw attention to our attire because there's intentionality behind
There
it,
is.
isn't there? Does one of you want to share and give away the theme of our discussion today?
Sure. So we are going to be talking about International Women's Day and Women's History Month. And these colours that we're wearing apparently represent International Women's Day. Apparently purple represents justice and loyalty to the cause.
Commitment to the cause.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And wasn't the dignity in there?
Dignity
which we were
as well.
About.
Yeah, complete.
I was like, I got my dignity. What does Huge represent?
Huge represents hope.
Always.
Always.
Yeah.
Mr. Strength Space.
Mr. Super Positive.
Yeah.
You tried to bring him down, but
It's so funny because this morning when we were walking in, I was chastising myself for not bringing my cup, and then was it you, Fran? Fran was like, "Oh, don't be hard on yourself." I'm like, "Me? What? I'm not hard on myself. I give myself loads of positivity every day because I'm Mr. Hope."
Mr. Hope.
Yeah.
And yeah, apparently white symbolises purity, which is a controversial thing. To be purity, women purity. I don't know. There's something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
a bit like
interesting. Something to unpick with that one, isn't
Yeah.
there? So thank you for kind of bringing and representing. It was interesting on the messaging this morning, wasn't it? Of kind of, we wanted to coordinate, so we were wearing different colours and we weren't all in white or green. And purple's not an unusual colour, but I think, not one that many people have in their wardrobe.
Yeah.
I don't own anything purple. Oh no, I do.
What is
I
it?
own like a nightie, so that wouldn't have been appropriate.
You're gonna put it in.
Like a galabea. Like my friend gave it to me from Egypt, so it's purple and it's got like gold and beautiful embroidery on it. But yeah, I couldn't have really worn that.
Yeah. And what about you? Anything purple?
I don't have anything. The only thing I have purple is my Barney costume for when I.
Can you imagine Nike and Barney?
Come in. Happy International Women's Day. I don't even know if that's Barney, the way Barney talked. I thought that's the way dinosaurs. Remember when we were at your house and you were saying that your daughter was at school, they told them, this is what the dinosaurs sound like. And you were like, how do you know? Who was around?
That was
Who was
so funny
around?
to say about that. Tell us about that.
So
we were crying.
Yeah, I was doing some research with my daughter because it's like the theme was dinosaurs, and so like. Firstly, I was like, there are like a gajillion dinosaurs. I thought there were only like 5, but there's so many. And then it was like, oh yeah, this is what it would have sounded like. And then you could press play for it to like play the sound. I'm like, but how do you know? How do you know that that's what it sounded like?
Oh,
yeah,
I love it.
brilliant.
So much of history, you just like, they could tell us anything. But that cracked us up. What does a dinosaur?
What if they actually did speak like that? Hello, I'm a T-Rex. And then we're just thinking that they're all roaring, but actually they can speak.
Full combo.
Because no one was around.
Can you remember the sound?
Oh, I do you know what? I think I was so like dismissive of it. Like I didn't even play it. I was just like, all right, love. If that, like, I don't know, I'm not buying into this. So I didn't even play it. But yeah.
As you said, shelf that under nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember. But also, I'm just imagining someone's job being that person, like, okay, pterodactyl. And then who's doing the sound for that?
Random. So random.
Honestly, but yeah, that really amused us.
Yeah.
But
There's
lovely.
a gap in the market, though. Maybe we should get into that.
No, it's been done.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Or yeah. Or we could sample dinosaur sounds for like some tracks.
Yeah,
Would have any like
I
T-Rex.
feel like this
being sampled?
conversation is taking a
Is
very
it-
strange.
okay.
Or we can update our theme music. Anyway, yeah. What are we here for?
What are we
Today
here
we're talking
for?
about dinosaurs.
So yeah, as you were saying, Naz, we're here in March and it's International Women's History Month, and then we had International Women's Day last Friday on the 8th of March. So we wanted to kind of spend some time having a conversation about it, thinking about what it is, what it means, and kind of why it's important, really. So I guess just to kick us off, I was thinking about what International Women's Day means to us. So I guess when we think about it, what are we thinking about in terms of our own individual experiences and lens?
When I was preparing for this conversation, I was like looking it up and kind of saying, you know, what is it? What is International Women's Day? And it, you know, I came across the kind of definition of it or explanation of it as being a day where you celebrate the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women, and also a reminder for like taking a step towards gender equality, more like really kind of emphasizing that cause. So that is kind of what I understand it to be. In terms of kind of like how I approach it, it's very, I don't know, it's something that it's not something that I would kind of think, oh yes, International Women's Day coming up. I don't know. It feels like a bit of a something that I'm more sort of leaning into, rather than something that's kind of, you know, been something that's really important to me. I don't know if that's really bad or not, but it's something that's like, oh, it's International Women's Day. Yeah, okay, let's turn my mind to thinking about women and our achievements and what we've done, which I think, you know, is a good thing, but also I think about that more than just on International Women's Day, just on that one day. It's you know, something that I think about quite often. So yeah, it is a good thing, and I'm also a bit like, are we only reserving it for one day? Shouldn't it just be like a constant thing? Yes.
Because I was going to ask, why is that your reason why? So why it's not on your kind of focus? Because it's something that you think about every day.
I wouldn't say I think about it every single day, but I definitely think about it outside of the allocated day. So yeah, it's not something that I think it should only be reserved for that day. So I think that's why I'm a bit kind of like, oh yeah, International Women's Day. It's a good thing, and it's also, you know, all of those achievements and things and striving towards gender equality is something that I do or think about more often than not.
For me, it's from my angle as a man. I think it's a reminder, like you said, Nads, to kind of shine the spotlight on women's achievements and the great contributions that women have made to society, the important contributions that women have made to society. And for me, as a person, I have a lot of women in my life. This is you two women in my life, important women in my life. My two other best friends are women, my mum, my sister. So I'm surrounded by women all the time. And I guess I'm thinking from my perspective as a man around allyship. And I think that's what is the most prominent thing for me when it comes to International Women's Day and Women's History Month. But a little bit like you, Nads, and is so I connected with the celebration and the acknowledgement and the spotlight shining, but also it's a reminder of just how far we've come, but also how far we need to go. And I think the challenge sometimes is things are shine or the spotlight shone on days and International Women's Day with the need to celebrate, and completely rightly so, but it also reminds me of just how much women are still being marginalised, discriminated against, abused in society, and we see it every day. And I'm just thinking about, and I think we've mentioned it. If we haven't mentioned it on here, we've definitely mentioned it in our conversations. But just with regards to the football movement and the narrative around female and presenters and commentators, and that's being on the rise, the abuse of women there by prominent people, which gives every other Twitter troll a permission to kind of talk. And then I was reading about what happened in a prison in Yorkshire, a youth offending prison, a teenage girl being held down and strip searched by all male officers, and the complete kind of disregard, lack of awareness of the impact of trauma that has on women, and stuff that we're seeing in society now is replicating the historical kind of abuse and marginalization and discrimination of women. So for me, the day is shine a spotlight, but don't lose focus on the fact that there's still a lot of work to do. And from a man's perspective, that's where my male privilege and my allyship, it's a reminder for me. But I like to think that I try to keep that up throughout.
Yeah, just to say that report was from Wetherby. It's a young offenders
That's the one,
institute,
yeah.
and it was a child as well.
Yeah.
We got to hold it. It's it's a female, but she was a child, and I think the idea of adultifying children is probably something for another podcast episode. But how are we thinking about our kids and in society, and how do we hold them to account in terms of fairly or safely is that was a story, but something to.
What about you, Fran?
Well, I was just going to respond to your point, and thanks for bringing that, because I think it is important, and it's, I guess, lovely that we have that within this room in terms of you bringing that male perspective, because I think when we think about what we're talking about is gender inequality, and we're talking about oppression, and we're talking about discrimination, and I think men have such a part. When we think of the structures that perpetuate that, we're talking about misogyny and patriarchy, and are thinking about men's responsibility for both perpetuating it but also dismantling it. And I think it's really helpful that we've got that kind of perspective in the room as well. I think similar to you, Nads, I suppose the struggle, and you kind of mentioned it as well, Yude, is it's real and it's every day. And I think when I think of International Women's Day, I guess thinking of the different parts to it, the one of celebration and the one of reminder and struggle, I think I go more on the celebratory side. So I message my people and send them love and do a lot of that. But it is also completely important to not forget that side of it, because that is exactly what it's about. And actually on International Women's Day, I went with my football team, so women and non-binary people, to watch Copa 71, which is a documentary film that's just out. I'll try not to do any spoilers, but it was basically about Women's World Cup that took place in 1971 in Mexico City. But the documentary, which I guess almost captures the many sides of International Women's Day, had it all. So these women who were pioneers and so progressive in going out there and experiencing a lot of abuse and discrimination to even get there, being celebrated with this brilliant thing that was going on, but then the afterlife of women being banned from football, and who decides? It was men deciding that this is not good for women and their bodies, and again a lot about kind of the control of women's bodies by men. So do go and watch it. But I think that had it all, and I definitely had that roller coaster of emotions of oh, this is brilliant, and the progress. And I think we have to think about that. The next day, I was where I live. I was just kind of out and about having a mooch, and I saw these little girls come out playing in their football kit. They'd obviously be playing football, and it filled me with joy and emotion, because I thought potentially they're oblivious to what's gone before, and I felt so happy. They looked about 6 or 7 that they'd just been playing football and they're in their football kit, but the struggle that these other people had gone through to get to that, and there's still a long way to go, as you said. We still have horrible commentators. I don't even want to give him the name space, but people probably know who I'm talking about, who are just perpetuating kind of oppressive structures for women. So that film sort of had everything that encapsulates International Women's Day for me. But as you said, Nads, it's I guess it's all the time. When you kind of live it as well. I watched a documentary the other day about Sarah Everard. I don't know if you... I saw it.
Did you see it?
Said,
Really?
Yeah.
What did you think of it?
It was just, again, I'd watched it after a long day. And actually, we've been doing some training with Social Matters on oppression and anti-oppressive practice. So, I mean, we think about it a lot, but I guess it was definitely in the forefront of my mind. Then with International Women's Day, gender inequality, and I just needed to kind of sit and have a moment in a dark room, because again, I mean, it was kind of the institutional sexism within the police force and the abuse of power, then violence against women and girls more generally in society. It just, it was bleak.
It was bleak, wasn't it? It was so bleak. And for those who don't know who Sarah Everard is or was, she was murdered by a police officer, a serving police officer, on while she was walking home, and it, like you said, it covered sort of, you know, institutional misogyny and racism and oppression. And it was like a documentary on sort of the investigation and how it sort of progressed. But I was thinking there was something that came up, and I was thinking about you, Huge, because we was talking about, it's kind of, you know, depicted women sort of rioting and protesting about, you know, what was happening. And I remember at the time you were saying, okay, but where's the men? Like where are the men in these protests? Like there were some, you know, but actually the majority were women. And I think that's something that really stood out for me. I was like, okay, but it's not all on us. Like, we're the ones experiencing oppression. It's not all on us to be pushing back and protesting. We need our male allies. We need people to kind of back us.
Definitely. And that's so key, because I think all forms of oppression cannot be undone solely by the group of people who've been oppressed, and men have to realize that we have power in certain situations, we have privilege in certain situations. We will be in certain contexts where other men will hear our voice, and that's where difference needs to be introduced. And men have to be at the forefront of protesting. Can you imagine how powerful it would have been if at the protesting for Sarah Everard, if it was just predominantly men at the front and saying, look, we've had enough. Like, you need to stop hurting our women and hurting our girls, because there's not one man on this earth, or one person on this earth, that hasn't got a connection with a woman. And if you've got a connection with a woman, it's likely you've got a connection with a woman who's experienced some form of abuse, and that can be physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and I think it's about people also redefining what they understand as abuse. So there can be abuse from a peer-to-peer perspective, but there can also be abuse and psychological abuse by context and by structures and by systems. If you're a woman that is sitting at board level for companies, it's likely that you're going to be in a minority. So every day you have to come and be a certain way, because if you are your authentic self, because of systemic sexism and misogyny and the impact of the patriarchy, you fear being yourself, because you're going to be viewed as weak or not good enough. Going back to the football commentary, those commentators who are women who are on TV constantly, Enia Luco, Alex Scott, Karen Carney, Laura Woods, they have to be perfect in what they do. Like, when people talk about Enia Luco making mistakes and getting things right, the amount of men that I've seen getting things wrong, the amount of men that I've seen do that on a constant basis in the 30 plus years that I've been watching football, no one comments on that. But Enia Luco makes one mistake on live TV. You know how hard that is? And to hold all the stats, and then she's shut down, and people are like, oh yeah, this is why women shouldn't be on it. So that pressure in male-dominated spaces to be perfect all the time, that's going to impact you emotionally. It's going to impact you psychologically. So I think from a man's perspective, we need to understand that the abuse still happens, and it happens even when you're not looking. So in spaces, whether it's protesting, whether it's in boardrooms, or whether it's down the pub with your friends after a game of football, those are all opportunities for you to introduce difference into the system, introduce the grit into the system. Your favourite line.
Yeah.
I think.
It's so true. And I guess just to build on that, I think when we're thinking about allyship in different forms, I think for men, I'm thinking about a lot of the work that we do at Social Matters in terms of diversity, inclusion and equity and belonging in workplaces. It's thinking about how you can decenter like maleness at the top, because that is a lot of workspaces are that and bring that. So what can men do to make those spaces more equitable and inclusive for women, so that, you know, in some of those examples, if you're the sole woman at the top in a boardroom, what can the men be doing to create a kind of a more kind of inclusive space? Just on the kind of the struggle and the fight, I just want to kind of read out some kind of quotes to all of us, and just invite us to sort of reflect and comment on them. And this relates to some of the kind of the way acknowledging progress, but kind of thinking about how far we still have to go. And this is from a site called This Is a Vulva. Brilliant. And they talked about reasons.
Oh, just got it.
They talked about reasons to still be angry on International Women's Day. So 129 million girls around the world are not in school. It will take another 131 years to close the gender pay gap. Black British women are 3 times more likely to die in childbirth or pregnancy than white women. On average, 2 women a week are killed by a current or former partner in England and Wales. Women do 60% more unpaid labour, i.e. household chores and childcare, than men do. 5 times as much research has gone into erectile dysfunction, which affects 19% of men, than research into PMT, premenstrual tension, which affects 90% of women and people who menstruate. So just some kind of stats there on the kind of the reality of the kind of gender inequality and struggle. So just, invitation for any reflections on any of that.
There was something about, I think, was it Dina Asher Smith? She was, there was an athlete I remember, and she had to run a race, like a really important race, and just before, I'm not sure whether she was menstruating just before or during, but that impacted her performance. And there was a conversation about where's the research into kind of how we support athletes who are menstruating, because that statistic that you showed there, 19% of men experience that, but there's so much research that has gone into erectile dysfunction compared to the research into women's issues. That's something that stood out for me when you kind of read those stats out.
And it's not talked about enough, because those stats, I found myself being shocked and not shocked by them at the same time. And it's just that they're not foregrounded, and the spotlight is not shone on them. And that, again, highlights the importance of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, because people need to educate themselves, because things that are seen as normal, just as standard, I think people don't recognise that is normal and the standard through a patriarchal lens and a patriarchal system. And things like, I was reading the other day around only recently it started to come into the public knowledge that safety in cars and seatbelts, all of the test dummies were men, none of them were women. So it means that a woman is more likely to suffer injuries because all of the cars, but people be like, yep, car's done, yep, it's safe, it passed the safety test, because all of those people there are all men. So again, like when I hear those stats, it's sad, it's shocking, and a reminder that way more needs to be done, because we need to dismantle like patriarchy. We need to move towards that gender equality. We need to have an equitable approach in the way that we speed up that kind of like journey to equality, which is a tough process, but it needs everyone in it.
Definitely. Which I think is a nice segue to thinking about like, I guess, ideas for thinking about what we can do. Like the struggle is real and the reality is there, and we've touched a little bit on it, I guess, in terms of allyship. But yeah, just thinking about things that we can think about that people are doing, ideas for kind of things that we can do more of. Just have that conversation of action, I suppose, that we always attest to on this podcast.
Yeah. For when I was, again, preparing for this, I was, and linked to the, I suppose, Women's History Month element of this conversation, I was thinking about, let me like look up some, East London women that have like made a difference and kind of
Yeah, exactly. You said Nadia came up.
Didn't come up, but I was reading it and it was honestly, it was so like inspiring. So there was a report, like a piece of research that was done on women activists in the East London boroughs of Hackney, Tower Hamlets and Waltham Forest, and it kind of spoke about how women were really, active in driving shift in like housing policy and gender equality, LGBTQI, A+ kind of rights. And it honestly, when I was just reading, I was like, I feel so inspired. Like it's so inspiring. And so for me, it just made me think about, okay, just the process of knowing your history or the history of your, like, it's about East London. So that's the history of my context, I guess, not just, the history of my race. But and it was just really inspiring. And it just made me think about that the importance of having that understanding, and the thing of doing as the idea of activism, like just the doing of learning a bit more about the history of where you come from, of your family, of your people, is very inspiring. So that's what I'd say.
I love that.
Do some research, some history.
Research. What about you, Huge?
I think it's about educating yourself and remaining curious when I talk about adults, because I wonder whether there are so many men out there who either don't care because it's not affecting them, or believe in this kind of like patriarchal way of operating.
Yeah. Well, more to lose, isn't it?
Yeah. Because in order for equality to be achieved with regards to gender, men have to give something up. Idea of like, oh no, well, I'm happy with my life. Life is good. I just walk around. I don't fear anything. I get promoted. I don't even have to know anything. That idea. So, but I also believe, I would like to believe that there are men out there who just are not educated enough because of their context, and they want to do something. So I think educating yourself through reading, through being curious about the role women play, and also doing something in a big way or a small way in your particular context. And then the other thing I think action wise is to target the kids, because I wonder where it needs to be a two-pronged attack, where we need to start educating children, young boys from an early age, to have a higher level of respect for women, to hold women up high in society, to lean into their allyship. Because when these kids are in their 20s, in their 30s, and they are running organizations, then that's over time is where the difference will be made. And I'm a little bit kind of fearful because of the impact of social media, the like incels and influencers on social media targeting young kids to think about women in a very derogatory way. So I think people who are for gender equality need to start getting in there and educating the children, the young boys around these issues.
Yeah. Mine's a similar, I think there's a kind of theme and commonality here on kind of, knowledge is power and education. And I think of my own journey, and I remember the first time, you remember your first genogram. We've probably talked about genograms on the podcast before, but for those that don't know, it's sort of like, it's a family tree. But I guess thinking about the social graces that we've talked about, where you will plot, different social graces within generations within your family and look for patterns of relating and migration. And I remember the first time I did my genogram and was unpicking gender. And I remember thinking, you know, my parents were both teachers. They were both classroom teachers. So there wasn't that hierarchy of my dad being a head and, you know, my mum being a classroom teacher. They'd shared the cookie, like that. I felt this sense of equality. And I remember being like, oh, you know, and I had a positive sense of my, you know, kind of identity as a woman. And almost like a naivety to kind of thinking about it. And this was many years ago. And I think for me, the education has been around the structural and institutional inequality of gender. So whilst, yes, you know, my micro had been relatively positive, I think what I wasn't attending to at that time was thinking about those bigger macro things that are at play. And some of them, when I look back, even at the time, I'd sort of normalised them because you normalise, and I think we've spoken about it before, like, I'm not going to go down that street. Like, even last night, the dark street, and I was like, no, dark lit. And then again, I think at Sarah Everard and a kind of horrible violence against women that we know is happening all the time. But again, it's so prevalent that I think I'd not even brought that to the forefront. So actually for me, it was taking that step back and really unpicking the impact of gender inequality in so many spaces, or why, you know, maybe jobs that as women you may not go for through kind of confidence and self-esteem, whereas you said men will just be like, yeah, cool, I can't, you know, there's not even thinking about that. So actually education on the kind of the wider levels, including the kind of political, institutional, has been so important for my journey, and how it kind of impacts you, but maybe it's kind of normalised. And then thinking about, you know, as we talk about allyship, how we can chip away at that, like, so from our own individual level, the conversations that we can have, as well as challenging policy. You know, if we're in a workplace, let's think about kind of recruitment, hiring processes, to really kind of, you know, attack the different levels that kind of gender inequality and oppression exists. So yeah, I think a similar theme and commonality, whilst still celebrating the brilliance of women, which is one of the kind of main aspects of International Women's Day as well. And that statement, you know, none of us are free until we're all free. And I think that is so kind of important on thinking about gender inequality.
Yeah, love that, Brenny.
So yeah, thanks both. As always, an interesting relevant conversation for International Women's History Month. We would always appreciate your reflections and anything that resonates for you, and thinking about how you can take some of the ideas forward to really kind of fight for gender equality. We have been three social workers talking about International Women's History Month and International Women's Day. You can find us on social media, on Instagram at Matters Podcast, on X at Matters Podcast, on Facebook, The Social Matters Podcast, on YouTube, The Social Matters Podcast, and I think that is everything.
That is!
Everything.
Hey!
Well, it took you 6 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.